What's up, Tesla family? It's Ray J back with another video. And in this one, I want to break down some catalysts that are affecting Tesla, what's happening with the share price for Tesla SPY and the overall market, and some very important things that Cathie would say about Tesla moving forward. But just know that I am not a financial planner, so make sure you take nothing I say as financial advice. And also, if you guys can, please check out my Webull link. If you deposit any amount of money, you're guaranteed 12 free stocks. If you deposit $500, you're guaranteed 20 in total. Deposit $2,000 or more, and you're guaranteed 40. The offer ends very soon in just about 2 days. Anyways, now let's talk about Tesla. So Tesla's holding this critical support at this 260 area. If you look at this very, very carefully, this is previous resistance becoming support now. And we're going to be watching to see how well Tesla tries to hold around this area. So this support right over here, let me just change the color real quick. It's going to be this 260 area. We'll see how well Tesla holds this. If it does not hold, we have an imbalance to fill all the way down towards about the 256 area. That's going to be my next target, very, very close to that area if we end up losing 260. So I'll be watching that very, very carefully. But just know that despite the fact that Tesla's slowing down a bit, this was not necessarily a surprise. I mentioned this in my video from yesterday that Tesla might see a bit of a slowdown because we're still up like crazy compared to where we were last week, right? Just a couple of days ago, a couple of trading days ago, Tesla was actually in the 190s and the low 200s. We're still in the 260s, so we're just fine. So don't worry too much about this. This is not necessarily anything that's too surprising. So let's now talk about Cathie Wood, and I'll talk about some news and what's happening with Tesla stock. What is Cathie Wood up to nowadays? So there's some news coming out that Cathie Wood has once again netted in a nice profit on Tesla shares, selling in a bunch of them, about $22 million worth, seeing a nice profit on them. Now, there's a lot of talk about that. She's selling shares, this and that. That's only about 85,000 Tesla shares in total that have been sold. Once again, putting in over $22 million. They're also up about 21.9% since. So that's very, very crazy since that ended up happening. Since that's happened with them doing this and making these moves in their different ETF funds, there are people out there who are very, very apprehensive about this, worrying about a lot of different things. Just know that this doesn't necessarily matter, and because fund managers have to manage risks and they're managing all this money, it's very, very normal for them to take some profits. That's very, very normal because then she could reallocate the funds in different investments. And here's why. So check this out. If you look at the holdings of ARK right now, this is in real time, okay? The number one holding of the ARK Invest ETF is still Tesla. It has an over $846 million value right now with a 14.61% weight right now. Roku is number two with about a $613 million valuation with a 10% weight. So my point in saying this is that when you hear about how, oh, they're selling some Tesla shares, it's very, very insignificant relative to how many shares they have, right? Selling $20 million worth of shares is nothing compared to having over 846 million worth. And it's still their number one holding. So she's still fully invested in Tesla, still very, very bullish for the long term. Her view has not changed. Don't worry about what the media tries to say or what kind of like narratives kind of shift with that. So just keep that in mind. As far as the future goes, Cathie Wood also said this very recently. She mentioned that Tesla is unlocking $11 trillion in revenue. There's potential for that much with the robotaxi fleets. Now, that's very, very bullish news in her opinion with what they're doing. And she believes that Tesla should once again look at some very, very new developments. We have ARK Invest analysts saying that in their view, Tesla should enjoy a price umbrella as its robotaxi launch ends up coming out, thanks to the current ride hail prices. So very, very interesting stuff right now. And there's going to be very, very big demand for this. Cathie Wood is still very bullish on Tesla as a result of this. And they did do some calculations about how much it may cost. We don't know for sure if that's going to be confirmed, but that's something that's worth noting. And besides that, the robotaxi is still very, very huge. So the robotaxi, also known as the Cybercab, is going to be very bullish for Tesla's long term. It could enter production as soon as 2026, according to Elon Musk. I'm referring to like mass production, maybe by 2027 if you want to be more realistic, but we'll see how it ends up going. Nonetheless, it's very, very bullish. In terms of the revenue estimations, I can't really calculate that right now. I don't know for sure until we actually see the product getting launched. So for now, this is just potential that we're seeing ARK talking about. Cathie Wood has been saying this as well, that she thinks Tesla is going to become a multi-trillion-dollar company, having price targets in the thousands of dollars per share. So regardless of whether or not that happens, even if she's half right, even if she's just half right, we could still see Tesla hit the thousands, which I believe it will. Even just $1,000 a share would be absolutely insane compared to where we are. And I see potential to surpass all-time highs in the future. But when that day finally comes, it's to be determined because of so many things going on in the economy and other factors like that. We are getting closer to a recessionary environment, so we still want to be very careful about those different factors. Besides that, I'm still a big bull for Tesla's long term, especially after what has been said. So what's happening with the market? Don't forget we have Alphabet's earnings after the market ends up closing for today. I'll go more over that in my next video. But just know there's not really much coming out. We just have some GDP numbers tomorrow, and there's not really a whole lot of data coming out for the rest of the day. Most of the data is already in. So that being said, what do I see for Tesla? Tesla's looking kind of lackluster right here. If we don't close or hold above 260, like I said before, this imbalance would drag us down towards the 256 area. There is that risk of downside. If that does not hold us, we also have our 20 EMA at 252, so there's going to be that risk of downside. So just keep that in mind. As far as SPY goes, we're just range bound right now. We actually tend to get bought up once again around that 577 area, and we tend to get rejected around 584. But I do want to call out the fact that we are making lower highs. We had a high up here at 586, came down, made a lower high, came down, made a lower high, and we're basically just range bound. So this is the range right over here. You guys can see we're stuck between this level right here and then this level up here. So as of right now, we're doing this. I do believe there is going to be a risk of downside considering that there's a triple bearish divergence and we still have some gaps to fill on SPY. I think there's going to be a big dump coming. That's my personal view. However, there's no confirmation of it yet, so I can't say it's starting yet. It may take another, a couple of days, another week or so, but just keep that in mind, guys, that is what I believe is going to happen over the next couple of weeks. There is that risk of a dump, especially if we lose our key support around 575. We haven't lost support yet to turn too bearish, but that is my view. As of right now, the market's range bound, so SPY is still shuffling between these levels. It could attempt to get close to 582 again, just continue to hold up for now. But like I said before, I still hold that same view that there is that big move that's coming. For ES, we're going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. Not really doing a whole lot. We're looking at this resistance around 58.80. Then we have the support to watch for 58.50, kind of being stuck right now. So we remain range bound, going back and forth for the time being. If we end up losing 58.30, though, we could be dipping lower, but we'll just have to wait and see. But like I said before, I think that we are still range bound on ES. We have to give this a little bit more time to develop. So if we end up losing the 58.30 area, we're going to be looking for a bigger dump, but otherwise we're just range bound. There's not much going on for the time being. However, I do want to call out, we still have those gaps to fill in the 5600 area. There are still some gaps down there, which I believe will get filled eventually. And I think that's, it's going to come soon. It could be after the election, could be a little bit before. We'll see when the dump starts, but I just want to give you guys a warning that there is a risk of that looking at these charts, looking at the fact that we are kind of consolidating. We're also seeing Nvidia being range bound between 138 and 144, going back and forth and back and forth, not really doing a whole lot. We did dip close to 138 as I predicted. Then we got bought back up. So now we're looking for this to shuffle around the 140 area for the rest of the day, most likely. And then we'll see what happens with the big earnings coming out. But for now, I just see a lot of shuffling that's going on. For Bitcoin, we remain more bullish, hitting 72,000. We could try to push a little bit higher. I mentioned to you all if we broke 71,000, we're looking for a bigger push. If we didn't, we'd be looking for a little bit of a dip to about 70,500. We came short of that target, hitting 70,600, only to bounce back up. So now the chart remains bullish since that didn't end up breaking. Going back to NQ, we're range bound, going back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. We have resistance around 20,600 and support around 20,464. Just kind of stuck right now. We could try to push a little bit higher on NQ. It's possible we try to get bought back up. But now the next big catalyst is going to be Alphabet's earnings. So just get ready for that just to be safe. For the QQQ, we're also just range bound. Once again, going back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. However, I do see some more upside potential for us to try to get closer to 500. Whether we break that or not depends on the big earnings coming out, especially Alphabet's. So we'll see if we get a rejection or not. But there is more upside potential for us to get closer to 500, of course. Uh, Looking at Aapl, we could attempt to just consolidate. I think we're just range bound between 235 to about 231. So look for more consolidation for the time being on Aapl, and we're just waiting for a much bigger move as we get closer to earnings. For the IWM Russell 2000, we dumped all the way down to 220. If that had fails, we'd be dipping all the way down to about 218. We're attempting to rebound, reclaiming our 221 EMAs. So it could attempt to push back up to just under 222. But if we continue to make a lower high, if we don't break the high up here, all the way up to 222.8. This could just be a high up here where we come down, make a lower high, then continue to dip all the way down to this gap fill. So we'll see if that ends up being the case or not. For coin, we dipped down to fill the gap exactly as predicted. Now we're trying to hold up. So we're looking for some range bound price action between 215 and 220. It's going to likely be range bound for now. However, there is that risk of this potentially dipping lower if we can't hold 215. So I think what's going to likely happen is we just continue to trade sideways for the time being. And then there might be a little dip coming to 211 if this continues to remain a little lackluster. So I do see a risk of that. Just be careful. It is just a small dip before it could bounce later on. Amazon looks like it's going to be hitting 190 very soon, could try to push a little bit higher, but then I see more consolidation because for the most part, Amazon's been stuck between 184 and 190, going back and forth for the last week and a half. So it could push close to 190, then come back down, just continue to trade sideways. Not really much is going on with this. Meta got a bounce because we got some new news that came out. Got some bullish news right over here, thanks to good ratings from analysts. So because we broke past 585, we're looking for this imbalance at 587. And I think we could push higher for the 590 target. We are back to bullish on Meta. Just wanted to make that very, very clear. As far as Microsoft goes, we're also trying to push. We're looking for 430 as our resistance. I think 431.5 is going to be coming next. If we break that, so look for a little bit more upside. We'll see if we reject or not, but there is upside potential. Google's also trying to push up. We're basically looking for an attempt to get back up towards 171. If that breaks, we're looking for 172 as our next target. So I do think we could be pushing for 171. So give this the time it needs. I think that there's potential in Google nonetheless. For other factors out there, we have the VIX. This is actually dipping a little bit. It's just kind of range bound, waiting for a much big move to be made. So that being said, guys, how does the market look? Right now, the market's all over the place. Some stocks are a little bit weaker. Other stocks are getting bought back up. For the most part, the market's getting bought back up, but stocks like Tesla are a little bit weaker. There's a possible head and shoulders here, and we're also dipping a little bit lower because we were due for this. So this imbalance is attracting Tesla lower. We're getting very close to my target in this 256 area. This 260 is not holding, but there is still potential for it to bounce off either 256 or 252. So we'll see how things end up going. But with that being said, guys, Tesla's doing a good job at holding up. I think that things are looking quite decent for it, and then we'll have to see how things end up developing, at least moving forward. But I really, really appreciate you guys so much for listening. I hope you guys have a really, really awesome rest of your day. I went over what Cathie Wood is saying, and just know that she is still a woman of her word, holding on to the majority of her shares. So don't worry too much about what the news says about them selling and any fears that emerge from that. I'll be back in another couple of hours for another update. Until then, thank you all so much for listening, and peace out.